Agenda. First of all, item 5, Greater Norwich Local Plan, proposed examination, submission on the requirement for gypsy and traveller pitches and allocation of sites for gypsy and traveller pitches. So you'll see there is a sheet here of amendments, which I could try to explain, but I'm going to ask in a moment Graham to talk you through those. So these proposals have been agreed by Broadland and South Norfolk councils. This is something that it's part of the local planning process that we conduct in collaboration jointly with our colleagues. So the purpose of the paper is to agree submissions to the GNLP examination in respect of the need for additional gypsy and traveller pitches to 2038 and to the proposed modifications to the plan, including the identification of sites for gypsy and traveller pitches to ensure those needs can be met. I'll pass over to Graham for the recommendations in a moment. I'll take the paper as read, but suffice it to say that we have met all the necessary requirements for forward planning, and also we've met the requirements not to discriminate against those gypsies and travellers who are no longer able to travel. But Graham, would you just like to explain the differences, the changes to the recommendation?
Yes, very briefly. So the information that was circulated today has been taken at the two additional cabinet meetings in South Norfolk. So this information has already been shared. Bearing in mind that the notice of that was appropriate circulated in writing to yourselves, so you can cite in advance. The only change to the recommendations per se in that is the fifth recommendation, which is seeking the delegated authority to suggest to the inspectors that further sites be added in following consideration of the results of the current consultation going on. Just clarifying those additional sites, the insertion of additional in recommendation 5. The other changes are that there is revised justification actually explaining how the responses to the consultation that have been made have been taken into account in informing which sites have come to the consultation, which is the revised paragraph 20. The other changes are more minor textual nature, a couple of corrections to the allocations that are being made, and one very minor correction or amendment to the background paper that's there, which is actually just reporting something that has already been changed. So if you do look at that background paper, it has already been modified. So those are the final changes. Process from this point, should members be happy following the consultation on the approval of South Norfolk and all the councils over the past 2 days, and we debated our own sustainable development yesterday. We're happy with proceeding. The next stages are recommendations and proposed modifications get submitted on behalf of the authorities collectively to the planning inspectorate and the people who are aggrieved with the allocations being made, or indeed the approach being taken to the assessment of needs for gypsies and travellers, will of course have their chance at that stage to argue with the independent inspectors about the validity of the process we have taken and whether to try and persuade the inspectors to change some aspect of it.
Thank you, Graham. That was very comprehensive, very helpful. Are there any questions from cabinet members? No. Lucy, do you have a question? Okay. So, all those in favour? It's passed. Thank you. So let's move on to item 2 now. Here we are, searching through the agenda, or should I say item 6? Scrutiny Committee recommendations. To consider the recommendations made by Scrutiny Committee with respect to green financing and welcoming asylum seekers and refugees on the 16th of March 2023. Who's introducing this? Paul. Paul.
I'm informally introducing it because they are of the School Council of Services. However, I know that it's a standing issue of how these recommendations are going to be qualified, and people will be covered up by Emma Hampton. We're meeting on Monday with Leah, so we'll pass that over to my colleague.
So, that was my error, but I'll get used to driving this thing eventually. So thank you, Paul, for that. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I was going to speak.
Oh, Emma's going to speak. Go on.
Well, I'm happy to take questions first, but I was going to point out I will address the green finance ones because that falls in my portfolio. I'm happy to speak briefly to that or to go straight to questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, let's do it that way. Apologies, Emma.
No, not at all. But yeah, it was a good couple of meetings, a really interesting presentation on that first meeting that I attended virtually, and then also listened in on the discussion members were having, which led to these recommendations coming out. And this is work for in this area. We want to progress through the development of the environmental action plan, and we're continuing to engage with the Green Finance Institute on this basis to figure out what might work for Norwich. This particular set of recommendations, it's a really strong kind of thorough output from those discussions. There's a lot of resource implications which are going to require consideration and working up the plans and costing for. But as I say, we do want to progress in this area. I suggest that that has to be done in the context of the discussions we've already started to have at the Sea Climate Panel. So we essentially refer it to there for future follow-up and to see how we're progressing on this set of recommendations.
Thanks, Emma. So, are there any questions from Cabinet members? No? Lucy?
Thank you, yeah.
Try the one next door.
Yeah, it's all right. It's warmed up.
Okay.
Yes, congratulations on your first cabinet in the chair.
Well, let's wait till the end, shall we? And you can tell me whether you want to review that. Thank you.
So there are two items here really. There's one about refugee migrant scrutiny, and there's one about the green. I've got a question on both, but I can do just one if you like.
One question in two parts.
Yeah, so obviously those were two really good scrutiny sessions, both of them, and just so the part about the refugees is that we've got this aspiration to be a council of sanctuary as well as a city of sanctuary, which I think we're all behind, and we need to keep, I think scrutiny agreed that we need to keep migrants' voice at the heart of that, refugee asylum seekers and migrants, their actual voices that are so little heard, and there was a real commitment from officers to do that, so I just wanted to point out that was a really good thing, and it's an ongoing process, and the suggestion from scrutiny to use community connectors, which is now happening as well, so it's a good example of that. And it was agreed to propose what's done in the short, medium and long term on the recommendations, which will obviously come back here. So I just wanted to be reassured that we'll have that clearly set out, so that we can then go back to those communities and show them how things have happened, because they've had a real strong input into the process. That's one part of the question. But the other part is thank you to Emma for listening at those meetings, and to Paul as well for the work on green finance. It's obviously investment in retrofitting is and the development of skills for that is an excellent commercial proposition for the council going forward. So, and there will be substantial resource coming from central government one day, hopefully, not long, hopefully, to upgrade our leaky and cold housing stock that is across the city. But I wanted to just know, obviously you said there's a resource implication here, but to just know when the date, if you have any idea of the date when that might start, you know, when you'd expect a month this year, when we'd expect to have a plan in place that would come to those. I accept it goes to see an SDP, but when are we looking at? Which month are we looking at it coming?
I'm not sure I could narrow it down to a month at this point. The next SEEP meeting's in a couple of weeks, and I would imagine the earliest is going to come back to the programme and the action plan as a whole, which, as I say, I think that's the right framework to be looking at this in, is going to be the meeting after. But I'm not going to commit to that because we want that panel to be looking at the issues where it can have the most impact at that particular moment in time. So, and that does change as the months go on. So, as I say, we've committed to timescales on the plan before, so that's the framework we're looking at this in.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, and the refugees.
Thanks. So I apologise for the lack of substantive answer. I did substitute for Alan at the scrutiny committee meeting. At the time, it was under Alan's cabinet responsibility, and it's now passed to mine. So I need to pick up the Council of Sanctuary stuff and what steps we need to take in order to meet that criteria that we're not already doing. In terms of community connectors, so our community connectors in Mancroft have been doing a piece of work around communities of interest, minority groups from protected characteristics that tend to congregate more socially within the city centre. So that's been not just for BAME, but also the LGBT communities as well. So there has been some work on that, but you know, there's also the issues of income deprivation in parts of Mancroft wards, in the Russell Street area, as you're aware. It's balancing it alongside that work stream as well with part-time hours.
Thanks, Adam. And I think what's to be proud of around asylum seekers and refugees in general is that there is a consensus across the council that we are a welcoming city. We want to be a welcoming city. We've been a city of refuge for centuries, and we're very proud of that. And I'm very proud that we have that consensus, that we're all in agreement over it, which is really, really, really strong, and it's a strong expression of the identity of the city. So thank you, everybody. So the recommendation is that we consider the recommendations. We've considered them. Is there a formal?
Emma's recommending that you refer the Green Financing recommendations to C, and there are no particular recommendations for these lines.
So that's fine. Okay, right. So the recommendation is that we refer to C. All those in favour?
Thank you.
Thank you. Now move on to item 7, which is the provisional outturn for 22-23, which has to be Paul.
Thank you very much, Chair. This report shows the provisional financial outturn position for the financial year 22-23, as reflected in the draft statement of account which was published on the 31st of May, and I congratulate the officers for doing so according to the official deadlines. The Council's final financial position is, of course, subject to audit examination, but of course is unlikely to take place until rather later in this financial year. As to the general fund, the provisional revenue upturn for the general fund as for the financial year 22-23 is of an underspend of 1.796 million. It's a variation of just £32,000 position forecast at Q3. Although budget pressures persist, these have been mitigated in financial year 22-23 due to £2.6 million in increased income from interest on balances and investments arising from the rising interest rates and higher cash balances. An additional grant income of £992,000 was also received during the year. In accordance with the budget, the general fund balances were reduced by 2.1 million to 8.249 million in the year, and the underspend of 1.796 million has been transferred to the business change reserve. The housing revenue account, the original revenue upturn for the housing revenue account for financial year 22-23 is an underspend of 1.37 million, variation of 2 million from the position forecast at Q3. 1.152 million of this variation is due to increased revenue contributions to support the purchase of new council houses from main homes at Trinity Meadows, following receipt of government funding. Additional £1 million has been transferred to the HRA Transformational Reserve. As with the General Fund, the HRA benefited from increased income of £900,000 from interest on balances and investments arising from the rising interest rates and higher cash balances. In accordance with the budget, 6.096 million of HRA balances were utilised in the year, which combined with the underspend of 1.376 million resulted in a provisional HRA revenue balance of 46,841,000. The provisional capital outturn for the General Fund is an underspend of 13.299 million. The provisional capital outturn for the HRA is an underspend of 7.843 million. For both programmes, the underspend are largely due to significant projects extending into the next financial year, and the budgets will therefore partially carry forward requests for which delegated approval is sought within this report. Approval is also sought to increase the financial year 23-24 General Fund Capital Programme by £222,000 to enable grant funding received from the Lawn Tennis Association to be utilised in the refurbishment at both Alderman Walker and Hartford tennis courts. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. So, first of all, are there any questions from Cabinet colleagues? Everybody's happy. Lucy, have you got any questions?
Thank you, yes. So page 60 is I can see there's an increase in income from off-street car parks, and we've asked about that, and some of it's due to higher charges. There's also higher levels of usage, which I understand is due to a change of habits and sort of return to pre-pandemic habits and activity levels. And I know that City Council put an excellent case to the county for Transport for Norwich strategy to confirm that there should be a shift away from cars to public and active travel, and has also expressed an ambition to reduce the number of car parking spaces in the city overall as we reduce the amount of land taken up by cars and clean up the city. I just would like it if you could confirm that the direction of travel is to reduce car parking spaces in the city overall, and say how you intend to work with County Council on that, and give some targets, sort of when we'll see a strategy set out on the future of the City Council-owned car parks.
Okay, I mean, are you comfortable to...
Well, that's not really my proposal.
No, it's not.
Your own, and you'd like to comment on that.
Well, it was mine, it's now Emma, but I don't think it's fair to ask Emma to answer that question, to be honest. So I'll take it. I mean, it's interesting. Also, part of the increase in fees, parking fees, I suspect, on the surface car parks is to do with the introduction of cashless payments, which has also, as I understand it, has contributed to an increase in usage. So that's something which doesn't come out in the papers, but I think that's a part of it. Clearly, we'll need to work with the new administration at County Hall. So we've got that, as you know, we've got the strategy, the bold, ambitious strategy for transport in Norwich that we agreed was 18 months ago, something like that. But there's been a change of administration at County, and also there's a change in the composition of the Transport for Norwich Committee with the change of control in Broadland. So I think we're going to have we need to revisit that and have those conversations afresh. Graham, I know this half comes under you, but have you got anything you want to add?
I think there's a couple of points just to note in response to the question. Clearly, one of the reasons we're exceeding our target effectively is the fact that we put up the charges quite considerably in in the year for the city councils and the car park. So that's always a balancing act in terms of how you set those charges. We haven't reviewed them for a number of years. And one of the ways that they were reviewed was to make them more consistent with the Transport for Norwich strategy, which is particularly about discouraging long-stay visitors to the city centre and travelling by their own private car. So there was a differential in terms of the pay structure, the charging structure for the pay and display car parks and the multi-stories that we introduced. And I think that will possibly take a further time to drive a modal shift. And what we may be seeing in the figure is patterns of behaviours will take a while to change in the light of things, but they may not stick. So part of the reasons why we changed the prices in the way that we did is to ensure greater consistency with stated objectives that we are trying to work with the county council to increase the degree of ambition over in relation to just dealing with the numbers issues of car parking spaces. We have a cap, which is a maximum level on the total number of car parking spaces overall written into our planning policy. We are somewhere beneath that cap across the city at the moment, and if certain developments come forward, most noticeably along at Anglo Square, we will fall further beneath that cap. So there is gradual tightening in the supply of car parking spaces across the city centre, particularly with regards to our own numbers of car parking spaces. That hasn't changed significantly in recent years, but we are working on a housing pipeline that is looking at future development on a number of those sites which are allocated for development in the plan. So we are working to bring them forward, but clearly we are treading a balance between different objectives of the council, as well as responding to quite a challenging financial environment that we've got. So there is always a balance to do that, but we are trying to find ways of getting ourselves off an addiction to car parking income and finding other more creative ways of using the land we own in the city.
Thank you, Graham. I think that answers it well. Thank you. So we are being asked, looking back at the agenda.
Mike. I just want to pick up on some
Oh, sorry, go on.
stuff
Go
deep
on.
in the report in my portfolio.
Apologies.
On the revenue outturn, Norwich Fringe project, 32k net income against a target of 18k. A lot of people don't know that we manage nature reserves and county wildlife sites in Broadland and South Norfolk, and that generates income to pay for maintenance of our own natural areas. Allotments budgeted for 9k net expenditure, we've got 14k net income. That shows how successful we've been at letting out so many vacant plots over the last year. Bottom of page 79, top of page 80. One thing we often get criticised is under delivery of capital projects. There's a whole series there of parks and open spaces and natural areas, capital projects that have been delivered, tennis courts upgrades, football pitch improvements, the Pine Park Pavilion, among Wenson Park Play Area, among a number of other schemes. And just looking at the grants we got in, the 222k grant from the OTA for further 3 tennis court sites, and the 85k for the works at Wenson Park. So I think it's been a really successful year. I pay credit to the officers and the team for all of their hard work.
Tremendous amount of activity, but also financially successful too. So yeah, well done to you and the team and the officers who worked on that. Okay, so we are being asked to approve an adjustment to the 23-24 capital programme and to seek approval to delegate to officers the approval of carry forward unspent capital budgets into the 23-24 capital programme, so that we're noting the report, and that's the recommendation. So all those in favour? Thank you, that's passed. Now we go on to the supplementary agenda. This is where the officers try to catch me out. So item 8 is an update on health and safety compliance in council homes and buildings. So that is Councillor Jones, who I think is going to defer to officers.
I'll do a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you. So obviously I've recently picked this up, but it's reassuring to see what a positive position we're now in. I think if you look at page 8 and 9 of the supplementary agenda, really gives you the positive overview of where we are, particularly where we are in terms of gas and water, hygiene, electrical safety. I think what I've noted most is the really positive in where we feel if there isn't something we're achieving quickly enough, that the extra resources being put in. I think one of the areas to really highlight there was with fire risk assessments. We're now doing over 90 a week to get us on track, and the extra resources put in if it's felt we're not getting there. So I think it's a very positive position. I couldn't hope to give you any of the detail. I was definitely defer to Brian on that, but it's been given me a very positive overview as an incoming cabinet member, and a lot of reassurance that actually there is a very, very tight oversight of this process, and that we're making very, very positive progress. And to be, moving towards completion of this, it's a very positive position. So I think Brian will probably be able to find far more detail than me, but I think from the introduction I've had, we are very much looking at the end parts of each thing, that actually it's about maybe getting access to properties where it's the hardest for you to get to, but the bulk of the work can be done, but very meticulously and with a very sort of close overview of things. I think it's a very positive picture.
Agreed, absolutely. Thank you, Beth. Brian, welcome. Would you have anything to add, please?
In reality, I suppose no. I mean, it's within the report. I think it's fair to say that we've come a long way on the journey, and we're looking to be BAU. I would suggest sort of September, October time. That's what we're planning. We're meeting the regulator again on tomorrow. And one of the things we're looking from that is a timeline to normality, whatever we want to call that, to understand what else we need to do to get them to be in agreement that we can move forward.
Thank you. And also, I think a good report. Okay, so Cabinet colleagues, do you have any questions or comments? Everyone happy? Good progress? Lucy, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. It's obviously good news that this has been brought to light, and the resources have been there to resolve it, such an important suite of issues. Just one thing that I'd like to ask about in the report, about the issue of the independent report, is that it notes on page 23 that there's a great reliance on interim expertise in key roles, that interims have made a fundamental contribution to improvements achieved so far, which is obviously necessary. But it says there could be challenges filling these roles permanently with candidates with appropriate qualifications and experience. This is a competitive jobs market. NCC's location puts it in direct competition with other larger local authorities and London employers, and salaries will struggle to compete for candidates whom London's an option. So the risk is the inability to meet the first action and the second section, which means staff with required health and safety competencies in place in the long term. Obviously, we don't want to find ourselves back here in another few years' time having to spend millions and millions of pounds to put something right. And it's a known risk. It says it's discussed at board and group, so it's there in the risk. But and there's medium-term mitigation in place, but long-term mitigation is still to be decided. And if you could tell me a bit more about how that significant risk is planned to be addressed long term.
It's a very fair question, and as you say, the risk is acknowledged. So, Brian, I don't know if you wanted to add something, but I think Lou might also have something to say in response. You want to go first?
You're right, it's one of the risks that we have within the compliance improvement plan and the risk matrix to understand that. And there's a couple of things really. One is about the upskilling of the existing staff, which has obviously been ongoing over the last 12 months, etc., to ensure that they're in a place for when we depart, they can still deliver that. I think I'm sure Lou will touch upon this, there is obviously a plan to go out and do the recruitment. I think it's clear that what we need to do is ensure that we get the right people in the right role, and sometimes that means it's not the first time round, but we need to make sure we do, and to make it, to sell the virtues of Norwich and why it's a great place to work, I suppose. But in essence, what the risk is the risk that's nationally everybody is having the same challenge in getting the right staff in place around compliance. So that's why there is a challenge, but we just need to go through it and go through the process, which I'm sure we will touch upon timelines, etc.
Thank you, Chair. No, thank you, Brian. That was really helpful. I guess the only thing that I can add is just to confirm that we're going out to permanently recruit to the roles over the next few months. And as Brian said, we want to make the roles as appealing as we can do. This is a great place to work. We've done an awful lot of work around the housing stock over the last couple of years. Of course, if we find that we are not immediately able to do that or not immediately able to fill all of the roles we're going to permanently recruit to, we will have the option to extend interim roles for a bit longer to tide us over.
Thank you. We are receiving this report to note, so we don't have a decision to make. So we'll move on to item 9. This is a decision. Award of contract for IDOC services to support digitalisation, I managed to say that, of the planning and regulatory service. So this is you, Beth.
So this has been a little while coming, but is actually, might not sound it, incredibly exciting from my point of view. This is a crucial step forward in, crosses over several areas, both planning and regulatory, but from regulatory services point of view, bringing our services, which the systems we use, which I can only say politely are maybe slightly antiquated, into the current century is really, really important. It's such a central area in terms of so many areas that impact the safety of our residents that having an efficient service is crucial. And we've got such ambition to extend that service, both politically and from officers. There's real enthusiasm, but if we don't have the infrastructure that supports that in an IT service way, we can't do that effectively. We're not maximising the use of staff time, particularly when it's such a difficult area to recruit to. I think this will massively improve customer experience because it's looking also at the front-facing services as well, but it's really modernising the internal processes. It gives us clearer oversight of those, but it will also speed those up and make those far more efficient, freeing up time, taking it away from admin into the actual inspection processes. So it's produced a fantastic report in terms of we've actually got looking at the implementation of this as part of this, rather than just what service we need. So this is something that we'll be able to move forward with quickly, which is positive, but it's done in stages so that we get it right. And I'm glad that the priority is starting with private sector housing, because I think that's an area where we've got a lot of ambition to move forward quickly. We've gone through lots of discussion of this, and there's been a lot of really good work going on in the background to understand exactly what we need so that it's totally fit for purpose. And I'm sure Sarah can give far more detail than me, but it's knowing that this is something that's going to make a real difference in the delivery and a fantastic first step forward in improving what we do.
Excellent, thank you, Beth. Sarah, have you anything you wish to add?
I don't know, actually. I think I was very well covered. Thank you.
Well, there's a compliment for you, Beth. This is very important, as Beth has just outlined. Are there any questions or comments from Cabinet colleagues? No, everybody's happy. Good. Lucy?
Yeah, thank you. It'd be great to have it in place. I just wanted to ask, sustainability considerations don't seem to be part of the tender process, because the environmental impacts considered neutral on page 5. Do we know what categorised youth services are going to do to monitor and minimise emissions and other environmental impacts from its operations, and how that compared to other providers? I'm assuming it was done under a procurement framework that maybe looked at that, so it'd be good to know.
Yes, Sarah?
It is secured under the procurement framework, and I would imagine it would be part of that process. I don't have that information here in front of me today.
Can we deal with that outside the meeting then?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so shall we go to the recommendation, which is on, I've shut my supplementary agenda down, page 29, thank you very much. So it's recommended that Cabinet agree to enter into a contract with IDOX for the software enhancement and additions as set out in the report. All those in favour? Thank you, it's unanimous. Moving on to item 10 now, so we're off the supplementary agenda, thank goodness. And this is you, Paul. This is approving the award of a contract to supply the wide area network.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, as I think with all issues of dealing with IT, I always feel I should have one of my adult children here to introduce it. At least the timing was fortunate, because if any silly questions do come into my head during this debate, I can always ask them. There'd be no danger of asking silly questions to them, because they long since realised that they know far better than I do anything. At least I know what wider area network is, but I'd like to hand over to Julian the details.
Well, the wide area network is essential for everything to work. Oh, sorry, yeah. Is that, yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So the wide area network is essential for us all to be able to use our laptops, for customers to be able to interact with us online, for our telephony to work. So, it's the nuts and bolts of what makes everything work. And we've been in a partnership with Norfolk County Council on the wide area network for the last 8 years, and the contract expires next March. It's the sort of thing you have to really prepare for, because it involves new contracts, sometimes digging up the road and putting in new lines, etc. So it's really important that we're prepared for this contract when it ends next March. We're proposing to enter into a contract with Capita, who we've been using for the last 8 years. Over the last 2 years, there's been no downtime. We've provided a really good service, so it makes sense that this is a great deal with them to provide those services going forward. And we're looking to enter into a contract over the next 7 years from March next year.
Okay, so this is fundamental infrastructure for the council and the people who use it. It's really, really important item. Are there any questions or comments from Cabinet members? No, we're all happy. Lucy?
Oh, sorry, I'm going to ask the same question about the procurement
okay.
and sustainability.
Did you catch that, Julia? It's about the sustainability criteria in the procurement process. Leah.
I think it's probably worth explaining at this stage, because both of these we're talking about framework contracts, and it will be the framework providers that ultimately assess factors such as carbon reduction and other social value and factors. So just for example, the one we're talking about here, the Yorkshire procurement frameworks, so they give a 10.5% social value weighting whenever they award frameworks, so they'll be looking at that as part of their assessment framework. We then call off the contract I can't say specifically for this contract in honesty, but on all of those contracts there then be different terms around what social value and sustainability criteria will actually apply to that different framework, but it is an important factor in how they consider awarding the contract.
Well, I think that answers it then, Leah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so there is a recommendation which is to enter a contract with Capita IT Services Limited to supply the WAN services. So all those in favour? Great, thank you, it's unanimous. The next item, non-housing managing assets, is also a below-the-line paper. Just before we go on to, does anyone actually want to go below the line on this? Are there any questions on the below-the-line report? Because if not, we can continue and then not exclude the public. Well, no one does, so that's fine. So, this is you, Paul.
Yes, on this paper, issue of bricks and mortar, but I will understand a little bit more thoroughly. First of all, this is to deal with the disposal of two assets. First of all is the Brook Hotel in Bowsville, which at the moment there is no income and indeed no potential income in the short term. It's recommended that we dispose this asset to the leaseholder in line with the terms outlined in the appendices. And 167, I do. Right. The gentleman who wrote Hugh Coleman's Wives. Right, Brother Haggard. Break the book, by the way. This is a shop which is owned by the HRA and is proposed to recommended to dispose the asset in line with the terms outlined in the exemption report. So I would urge this committee to approve both decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think both reports are very clear. Are there any comments? Oh, Mark, would you like to add anything?
I think Paul summarised quite well. Questions
Okay, thank you, Mark. Are there any comments or questions from Cabinet members? No, everybody's content. Got a question, Lucy? No? In which case we'll move straight to the recommendation. There are, just where the recommendation's gone, it's disappeared. Page 91. So the recommendation is simply to approve the disposal of the assets outlined in this report. That's both of them. So all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. And that concludes